Great. Okay. So yeah, so this is a hub and spoke. Before you create a new tenant, you want to see Landlord already exists and is participating in the Landlord program. So that might be one reason you're searching for a landlord. Tenant pool, you may be searching for a landlord because that landlord is reporting they were sent an invitation through the Landlord Information Verified activity, and that landlord is reporting that they're having issues logging in. So they're saying, I'm getting an error. Well, we know that that error is most likely related to they're trying to put in an EIN number that is already in the system. And so we're going to show you how to globally search for that landlord record and make sure that that we know how to connect that landlord who has already registered to the proper registration. Liz, you want me to keep going or?
Keep on going. Hold on. Yeah, keep going, please.
Okay. Tenant record, some reasons you might search for a tenant record. If the hub and spoke CDO, the tenant is new. So the tenant is, you have a tenant that has come to you and you have said, okay, they've sat down and they can't remember if they registered or not. Maybe they registered in March and haven't heard anything, or they are not sure if they have registered. So we'll show you how to globally search for that as well. So you can kind of get your bearings to see if that tenant has already registered and is in the tenant pool. And you know, if the hub and spoke is wanting to take them out of the tenant pool, or if for a tenant pool or large landlord, if you are thinking of serving this tenant in your 25% carve out. Additionally, creating tenant records. We'll go over tenant pool, large landlord, and hub and spoke, all creating manual records and how that process works. And you know, you might be doing that for your 25% carve out. All program types can do that when they are attempting to serve their 25% carve out and are adding a net new tenant. So we just want to make sure that we're not duplicating a tenant record that already exists in the system. And we're going to show you the best ways to do that. Then we'll be covering login issues, how you help a tenant or a landlord who can't log in. And we'll pull some issues there. And then what we're going to do at the end of each session, we're going to do a Q&A. And then if we have additional time, we will end the meeting, so to speak, until that next training session grouping. So if you go back up to our original agenda slide, just to let everyone know, so we are attempting for the 9 o'clock hour to cover tenant and landlord troubleshooting. And then once that hour is completed, we will answer all Q&A questions that are in the chat. If we end early, we will end early and put something up on the screen so you know that. And then we'll come back at 10 o'clock for the next grouping. So if it makes sense that you want to attend a certain portion of this training, please feel free to do so. We will be starting each portion at the designated time. So the 9 o'clock hour is for tenant and landlord troubleshooting. The 10 o'clock hour is for supervisor responsibilities and physical tasks. And the 11 o'clock hour is for landlord attestations in the system and adding rent details. And so that is how we have structured this training. Please keep your questions and in the Q&A related to the topics at hand. We want to make sure that everyone is getting the best and the most they can out of this training. And in order to do so, we need to kind of be resigned to making sure we are answering the questions around these topics. As these are the largest topics we consistently are getting from agencies who have these questions. So we will proceed on to how to do these things. So the other thing I want to say is if we're giving you an example and telling you that you should be able to do something in the system and you are attempting to do the thing that we have just shown you, and you cannot, for whatever reason, please very specifically put that in the chat for me. It should say, user A, oh, Liz, you created a Google Doc for that?
I did. Yes, please click on this
Beautiful.
link. It has fields for name, agency, and what you believe your permissions should be. We would really love to see, we would love to get a response from all of you. So please, yeah, click on that link and let us know if you have troubles. Otherwise, do post it in the chat. We will be monitoring that.
Liz, will you put 2 more columns on that says what I believe I should be able to do and what I cannot do, so that we understand what it is that you're not able to do.
Got it.
So we'll be collecting that information throughout. So if you'll just click that Google Doc in the chat and just fill that information in, we're going to make sure that everyone can do what we are saying that you should be able to do. So best practices. Why do we search the system? We search the system because we want to make sure that there are no duplicate records. To find out if the landlord is already registered in the landlord program, because again, I want to make super clear, tenants who are associated with landlords in the large landlord program have some protections until the end of the year. And so it has really been King County's goal. We are pushing very hard to serve as many people in the tenant pool and through hub and spoke as possible, because those folks have less protection. So just from a realm of scalability and I think, Liz, you sent the link to the host and the panelists. Can you change that to everyone so that everyone?
You got it. My bad.
Great. No worries. Thank you. So we want to make sure as many tenants are served as possible. And in order to do so, we want to make sure that as many tenants have protections as possible. And so if, again, if a tenant is already registered in the large landlord program, they will be served. They have additional protection. And we want to make sure we're serving as many folks that are in and of the hub and spoke community, and additionally, the tenant pool as quickly as possible. So please help us in doing so by searching to make sure and see if a landlord has already registered in the program. This prevents barriers and roadblocks later. So many of you have seen the effects of the cascading effect. Many of you have seen and felt the effects of not being able to own or assign a vendor record. Part of that is related to the fact that these folks are already being served by another program type. And so if they are being served by another program type, by searching, you are eliminating those issues for yourself in the future. And so it is critically important that you search, that you double search, and that you triple search, and that you do this in a couple of different ways, just to make sure we are not duplicating effort, and we are serving as many people as possible to keep as many people housed as possible. That is ultimately our goal. It saves you time. It saves you time because you don't have to come back to our team and ask for a bunch of reassignments. It saves you time because, again, preventing those roadblocks and barriers from the system perspective will save you time. Additionally, it provides you more context and information. So if you're communicating with a tenant and they have a lot of questions, you can actually see and have visibility and understanding deeper into the information that is contained in the system. So we'll keep going here. So if everyone will just take a second and log into the CRM, I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that because I want to make sure that you can do the functions that we are talking about. So I'm going to take, we're going to just hold here for 1 minute, and if you will just log into the CRM, and again, this is just in the effort to make sure that everyone can do everything that we are talking about. And so take a minute to log into the CRM, and then we'll take the next steps together. Okay, so once you're in, at the very top there, you see an icon. It looks like an hour, magnifying glass. I almost called it an hourglass. A magnifying glass, and you will just click on that magnifying glass. And this is called global search. So additionally, you kind of see underneath it, it's a little bit cut off there, but there's a search this view. We're telling you, don't use the search that view because you're only searching a specific group of information. When you're searching for a landlord, use this global search at the very top there. this little search icon, click on that, and then you can actually put any piece of content or information that you have into that search bar. You can use the landlord's contact name, the point of contact that you have, the tenant's address. When using the tenant's address, simply use the street number and street name. Do not use the unit number. There's a lot of reason for that, but from the landlord perspective, the large landlords only entered the street address, not the unit information. So please be very careful there and only enter the street number with the street name. Additionally, you can search by email and see how those folks have created records in the system. You can also search here by EIN. So if your landlord is reporting to you, and this is for all program types until we get the system fix in place, if your landlord is reporting to you, I am getting an error on the portal side, right? I'm trying to go into the portal, I'm trying to enter my information under that company profile, and I'm getting an error. That error is most likely happening because someone has already registered that landlord and their EIN in the system. So if your landlord gives you their EIN number, you can search here by EIN and see the registration that that landlord has already created. We encourage you to do so. Property name. If you have the name of the property, the actual business name or property name, you can also search there to determine if that landlord is already in the system. Next, you can search, when you're searching for the landlord point of contact name, you're going to see a relationship. So when you're using that global search, it's giving you the information in columns, right? Those columns are related to different types and groups of information in the system. Those types and groups may be the contact record, they may be the account, they may be the tenant record, or the landlord registration. So depending on how you search from that global perspective, you may see different types of information in different groupings there. So you can choose the one that makes the most sense for what you are trying to learn about or understand. And they are all related. So we will we'll demonstrate that here in just a moment. Let me see if I can screen share really quick. Let me get into the right place here. I am going to just take a moment and show you guys this so everyone understands what we're talking about.
Sabrina, I just made you co-host. You should be able to share.
Thank you. Okay, can everyone see my page here? Got a thumbs up from Liz, thank you. Okay, so if we're using this global search icon at the top here, and we're searching, I believe I have, we're searching for a landlord. Let me think of one that we've used many times. Any information that you are searching in the top here, you can see you have tenant records, you have vendor records, which are the landlord registration. You have contact records, which is just simply anyone who has touched the portal for any reason. And you are able to see that information in grouping. So let's say that I had an address. We know that this one is in here, so 4300. So I go back to my global search, and I put in 4300, and that information pulls up every address in the system for a vendor, which we know is a landlord registration, for a tenant, which may be associated, right, with that vendor, depending on their address and if that information matches up. And then additionally, any properties associated are also here. So any record type in the system with content that matches here shows up in your global search information. So again, all of your groupings are in customers here. You have accounts, contacts, landlord registrations, property records, and tenant registrations. You can search any criteria in this global search and be able to see that information for whatever record in the system that particular piece of information you have has association with. So we want to make sure you're using that global search, as this is the best way to look for relationships and information in the system. When you click into records from this global search here, additionally, you could get content like this. This is simply an email that has been sent. If you have tenant registrations, there are relationships that are created, and you guys know many of them, but there are properties. So from the tenant registration, you can get to properties and the property address if it's created. There are accounts, and the account records also live in this property information here, and landlord registration records as well. And so there are many levels and layers to a landlord record, including potentially multiple AC records, property records, and VE records. But ultimately, you can see and understand all of that information and how it is grouped by simply globally searching here. I'm going to stop sharing this now, and we're going to go back to our slide deck and keep going.
Guys, is it good?
Okay.
Okay.
Next slide. Yep. Okay. How to search for a tenant. Again, we're using the same criteria. We're going to make this as simple as possible for you. Global search icon at the top. Just simply search that global search. You can use any information that you have for the tenant. Name, address, email address, phone number is even applicable. You can use whatever piece of information that you have and use that global search. Let's see. So I think there's a lot of questions in the chat, and if someone will just check out the chat and the Q&A and make sure that when we cover the questions and the content, we are answering those live. If someone will just monitor that for me, that'd be very helpful. So we're going to go to the next slide, Liz. We're only doing this, we're only manually registering a tenant when there is no match after doing a global search. For tenant pool or landlord only, if it's your 25% carve out, right? Otherwise, you're already going to have the tenants, if you're in the large landlord program, from the bulk upload. If you're in the tenant pool, those tenants are going to have been assigned to you from the tenant pool. So the only time that you would need to search for a tenant before manually registering is if you're using your 25% carve out and that tenant has not been in the system already. Hub and spoke. So you are only using this manual registration if you're not getting that tenant from the tenant pool. So if you're not getting that tenant from the tenant pool, then you can do this global search before registering that tenant to make sure that tenant is not already in the system, so you can begin working with them.
I'm going to take a quick moment to ask some questions that are related to searching for landlords and such, just before we move on to creating a tenant record, if that's all right, Sabrina. Okay, so one question is, the landlord invitations are being sent out blank. Is this a known issue that the technical team is working to resolve?
Yes, and if you have VE or TE examples of this, we would love those. We have already dug in with our developers and we're trying to give them all the data so that they can understand why this problem is happening. So if you have TE and VE information on that particular problem, drop it in the chat and I will grab it out of there before we leave.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. We appreciate that. Context is everything. And then if we search for a landlord and see that they are already being served by the tenant pool program, should we not ask to serve that landlord through Hub and Spoke?
So the landlord, so to be clear, a couple of things. This is kind of a layered question and I want to take it layer by layer. So if that landlord is participating in the large landlord program, and on their vendor registration, the program type is labeled Landlord. That is how you know, right? And I'm gonna screen share for a second. I'm actually gonna have to go into prod, so you're gonna have to bear with me for a second. But if their vendor registration, and actually let me not do that, let me do it here. If their landlord registration is, the program type here says Landlord, right? This particular one says Tenant, but if their program type, and my computer is like extremely slow today, I apologize. If their program type says Landlord, like it does in this record, this lets you know that they are participating in the landlord program. So again, Hub and Spoke and tenant pool agencies, if you find you have a tenant that has been assigned that is participating in the landlord program, we request that you do not serve them. They are protected, they have protections. Our agencies are working very swiftly with this group of landlords. And so again, please do not serve the tenant if the landlord is in this program type. They may already exist and they may exist from a bulk upload later. So you can have the tenant register and go through the tenant pool. Most likely their property will become matched. If you are getting them from the tenant pool and they have not, and they were not linked with the large landlord, let our TA team know, and we will link them with the large landlord program if you find that their landlord is participating in this large landlord program. So additionally, if the landlord record says tenant, and it is all the way to completion, right? See how this landlord record is to completion and tenant? You are good to go on that landlord profile. Landlord profiles do not need to be repeatedly completed. Once we have their banking information and their W-9 information, that landlord record can be completed once, and then tenant pool agencies may serve multiple tenants with that landlord. Hub and Spoke agencies may serve multiple tenants with that landlord. So as long as that landlord is in the program type tenant, Hub and Spoke and tenant pool agencies can continue serving those tenants. That is no problem. And that is what we want.
All right, can I go with the next question? I have talked with some landlords who think they are enrolled in the large landlord program, but they don't appear to actually be in the program based on what's in the system. In those cases, should we just ask the landlord to proceed with processing the individual tenant cases we give them?
So I would. Oh. I did it again. I'm sorry. I would want for our team to vet that, and here's why. The large landlord program, what we have seen is some of the large landlords did not enter their address information correctly. And so I would ask that if you have a situation like that, you elevate that through your EPRAP team lead and then we explore that for you and get back to you with a straight answer. I do not want us to serve. It is just going to create more challenge for you and your organization and getting to the end steps if we are serving folks that are matching up in the system. And so again, it is critically important that we are looking at this information and making sure that that landlord is not participating. If they are giving you conflicting information, right, you can't see them in the system, but they're saying that they're participating, that might very well be true, and let our team help you decipher that before you begin to serve.
This is a great question about doing a global search. When we're doing a global search for a numbered street, does it matter to spell out the street name versus using numerals? For example, spelling out 7th, so SEVENTH versus the number 7TH.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And my answer to you is do it in multiple ways. So you may at first, I'm again going to steal the screen. The thing about address information is it's really fickle, right? Like we have some really, I've seen like half streets. What is a half street? I have no idea, but the U.S. Postal Service knows. So when you're searching for something like that, search in smaller increments. So I might search 234 and find a record, right? Whereas if I search 234 7th, I would not find a record. And so I would encourage you to start as small as possible. And if you're still not able to differentiate or decipher, you can add additional criteria as you move forward. So I may search second like this and get this information. But if I search second, I might get this information. But if I search 2, I have a lot more options to choose from as I search.
This search should be done once you start communicating with the client before starting the application, right?
This search, I'm sorry, ask the question again.
So essentially asking, we should be searching as we are beginning communication with the client before we start their application, before they start their registration. So
yes, if you are considering doing a manual registration, 100% search before you do that. If you are trying to get information on a landlord for other reasons, you know, there are many reasons you may search for landlord information. But for tenant, before you ever start a manual registration, you should always search.
So there's a good series of questions about what do we do when we find that there are actually tenants that have duplicate records, or for instance, a landlord has multiple EINs, or has the same EIN but different properties. What do we do in those instances?
So if there are multiple tenant records, that is going to show up. I know that you guys have seen this. We have multiple ways that we're deduplicating duplicate tenant records. Our program management and evaluation team does this on a weekly basis. We actually pull the whole group of tenants registered in the entire system and we deduplicate. Additionally, you will also see the system is running a duplication criteria. So if there's a duplicate tenant here, that will eventually get resolved either by our PME team or can be resolved by you, the case manager. And we will give a secondary training on how to resolve duplicates. So Liz, if you'll just make a note of that, we need to give some information around that. But deduplication is happening on many levels with many different people at many different times. So if you see a tenant record that is duplicated, it is most likely going to show up in one of our criteria, and we'll do a separate training on how to deduplicate this and how to act on that in the proper way. But if you are globally searching and you have two tenants with the same name or what have you, and you think that they are duplicates, and the system has not yet picked them up as duplicates. For example, I have two here, user test 001 and 001 here. The system could see them as duplicates, but if you were choosing, our team will actually be the ones that have to take action on these around deactivation. And so our encouragement to you is you can make us aware of that through your EPREP lead. But ultimately, it is resolved on a weekly basis, and we deduplicate every record that we can find relationship that creates duplication on. So we're doing that at a system level on a regular basis.
And then lastly, just wanting, before we move on, because we are getting short on time, but can you show how can we find out if a tenant is part of the large landlord program?
So the easiest way to find out if a tenant is part of the large landlord program, and again, is it may not happen until you've reached out to their landlord, right? Because the tenant in these situations are giving you landlord information, and it may not happen until you've said, oh gosh, Kim Tebow, that's their landlord. And when the landlord responds. And so there is no easy way to know if the tenant is in the large landlord program, because the landlords have registered first. So you're going to need that property record and that vendor record to know if that is happening. So ultimately, you'll have had to have reached out to the landlord. But what I can tell you, and what I think is, again, the best strategy here, by clicking this global search, if you know that the landlord is Graystar, you're searching Graystar in the system. If you know that the landlord is Joe, you are searching Joe in the system to see if Joe already exists and what properties he may be managing. And then there may be multiple units associated to that. So this 12,129th lane could have P105, P106, P107. It could have multiple properties associated with it and have those units there. So again, I would simply ask you to globally search whatever information the tenant is able to give you about the landlord to see if that landlord record already exists.
All right, Sabrina, I suggest we move on from Q&A, and we will hopefully have time at the end here. All right, Sabrina, I just shared my screen about login issues. And Daniel Tiger was who I chose because my toddler loves. It's his neighborhood.
And moms come back, they always come back. Those are the things that are around our house too.
Yeah.
So troubleshooting login issues. So the way that these things normally come up are multiple ways. The tenant registered 6 months ago and has completely forgotten what they use to log into the portal. So you would search Daniel Tiger test. Did you create this in the test environment list?
I created it in the live environment. My apologies.
Okay, no worries. So Daniel Tiger test, we would be looking under that web authentication tab, and that would tell us up here at the top, right beside general, there's a web authentication. That tells us this is the email address that Daniel Tiger logged into the portal with. So if they are like, you've just gotten them on the phone and they're saying, I have no idea how to get back into the portal, Daniel, here's your email address. Send yourself a password reset. The additional way that this comes up on a regular basis is I am a landlord, and I think we have this on the next slide, Liz.
Hold on one second. Let me just make sure.
I'm a landlord, and I am getting this error when I log into the portal. And so the error comes again, generally in almost all cases, from let me just show you, from a duplicate EIN issue. So someone else, like, let's think about this. There are all of these landlords from this large company, and your tenant in the tenant pool or in the hub and spoke has given you information on their landlord, and they've given you Sally. Sally is she is their property manager. Sally is who works with this tenant on a daily basis. She's in the property management office right at the site where this tenant lives, and the tenant believes that is her person, that is her landlord, that is who should be getting this communication. Well, what Sally doesn't even know is that the property management company that owns 600 properties has registered for the landlord program back in May. So Sally's getting this invitation. She has no idea that her company has registered. She's just trying to help her tenant get rent paid, right? So if you have that EIN number and you're talking to that landlord, you would simply say, landlord, what is your EIN number? Okay, I've got you pulled up here. Can you tell me, it looks like your company has already registered. Can you tell me anyone that you know of that might have registered for this program? It looks like they, we have a phone number ending in 7656. We have the first name of this person is Sam. Do you know who that might be? You would have those conversations to get them to go back to the primary person at their agency who would have registered their, portfolio potentially for the large landlord program or the program at large. And so again, it's just one of those things where this is a massive scale of people utilizing a database system. And many times there is very little communication at the landlord level. And so by being able to just search at this global search level on their EIN, you can get to those answers and help them filter through these questions very quickly. Let me go back to the slide deck, Liz. I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping around. So let's say that you're troubleshooting the landlord's contact information because exactly the same circumstance I just gave you happened, right? So you had an email address, but that wasn't the right contact person. So you've now had this conversation with the tenant, and you're going to update that email address on the vendor record. Liz, I think something happened here.
Oh, my apologies.
So sending that landlord invitation, once you click landlord information verified, and you move that to approve, you're unable to send that again in that way. So what you need to do is you need to go to the top where it says send landlord invitation once you've corrected that email address, and simply send that landlord invitation that way. Okay, we're going to keep going. Liz, I have time zone issues, so can you tell me where we are according to our agenda?
4 minutes until 10. Should we do a little more Q&A?
And is this Q&A for our first group of topic or second?
First group. We have a few more questions that have not. So when we discover that a tenant is part of the large landlord program, what are the steps we should be taking? We'll leave with that. That'll be our last question that we can get answered.
say it again, when you discover,
after having done our global search and determining that someone is part of the large landlord program, what are steps that the caseworker can do?
yeah, so the caseworker informs the tenant. If you see the relationship and you see that that tenant has been assigned to an agency or an agency worker, you should be able to click on that blue agency worker information and at least access a phone number or Google search and give the tenant a contact.
That is wonderful advice. And then
I'm going to try to answer a few of these questions in the chat.
Absolutely.
If that's okay.
Totally.
So that we have written answers for everyone. Okay. I have a landlord who told their tenants to apply for faster service to the tenant group. That happens all the time. What should happen, the expected system behavior, is that address is matching and they're going to a group that says landlord participating. But again, the landlords didn't all enter their information right. And so that system, that process is not perfect. So if landlords have told their tenants to apply to the tenant pool, once you understand that they are in the large landlord program, we need to again, bring them up, rise them up to your EPRAP trainer lead, and then bring them to our team so that we can get them in the right status in the right group. So again, our goal, our ultimate goal together as a body of a team of people working on this work is to keep as many people housed as possible. And this is one way we are doing that work. I'm also not clear about the 25%. So to the entire DCHS team that is doing some of this processing, the 25% only applies to our CBO partners who are doing this work. So it has nothing to do for our DCHS team. Contractually, for all of our CBO partners, they have a 25% carve out that they are aware of. Thank you, Anne. I will make sure that you do. I saw your message. I appreciate that. Let's see. This search should be done once you start communicating with the client before you start the application. Yes, exactly. Once you know any information about this client, you should start searching. If we locate that a tenant has a duplicate record after doing the global search, what should we do with the records? This will resolve itself, like we talked about, over time. But if you want to elevate to your EPRAP training lead, we can do that. And we're also going to do another training here in a week or so to make sure everyone knows how to deduplicate records and what that looks like. So if we write the tenant name and it shows up that the property and the tenant, does it mean it's in a large landlord pool? No. The best way to determine if the tenant or the vendor is related to the large landlord program is simply to look at the vendor's information and see if it says program type landlord. If we're doing a global search for a street number, does it matter if we spell out the street? So this again is one we've already answered, but I'm going to answer it live as well. Use the least amount of information possible and sift through the records that have that information that you've brought forward. If it's too many, right, let's say you search 1, 2, 3, 4 and you have 200 records, search 1, 2, 3, 4 main, and then you might get 50 and it's manageable to search through and make sure you're looking at all of the potential records that match. All
right, we are right at 10 o'clock, Sabrina, so just wanting to be mindful of time. So I'm going to stop this recording. Yeah.